democracy for our state and for people who support our community.
Dr. Hans-Jakob Schindler is the Senior Director of the Counter-Extremism Project in Berlin. Good evening, welcome to the programme. It's an extraordinary story. We are told the group feeds on conspiracy theory and fake news, much like those connected to QAnon in America. So maybe you could start by telling us what it is they believe.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Look, I mean, they're not very much like QAnon. They had elements of QAnon in their belief system. So as your colleague just outlined, it is part of the wider Reichsbürger movement that simply believes that all political institutions in Germany are illegitimate. The QAnon narrative comes in because this particular group believed that there was a deep state that is about to intervene in Germany to change the political system, and that they wanted to support this, what they called alliance of deep state elements in their efforts to take over the state. And they were very concrete in the planning. So there was a concrete plan to storm the federal parliament in Berlin with armed individuals. There was concrete plans to attack local institutions all over Germany, including power stations. There was scoping of German military installations and attempts to recruit members of the armed forces. There were members of the armed forces among those arrested today and the 27 additional suspects that are in the investigation, including an active member of the German military special forces, the KSK. So this is very serious.
How quickly would they have been able to do that? I mean, why was the raids carried out today? Was it imminent?
Look, I mean, they've been, according to the indictment, on it since November 2021. The really interesting aspect here is that this investigation started as a sideline to another investigation of the Reichsbürger, another cell that was planning to murder the German health minister, Karl Lauterbach. And so these are part of the Reichsbürger movement who are also at the same time COVID deniers. So it is, and it was a very advanced planning stage in which they got arrested today. As your colleague said, they had already allocated ministries and individuals. And the MP was the core member of the 25 arrested and a serving judge in Berlin, and she was supposed to take over the justice ministry after the coup.
Goodness me. There are reports that they'd reached out to the Russians. Is that true?
Yes, there was a Russian individual who was also arrested today who helped the head of the movement, this Heinrich XIII in character, to get in touch with the Russian Federation. Now, the German authorities say there's been no indication that the Russian Federation in any way, shape or form reacted or supported the cell. Of course, the Kremlin immediately denied any knowledge of anything, as they always do. However, it's quite telling that there was an attempt to reach out to them in this particular point. As you know, there is a small war going on fairly shortly east of Germany at the moment.
Dr. Schindler, stay with us. I want to bring in our panel on this story, and particularly you, Peter, because you served as the chair of the Joint Intelligence Committee here in the UK. I wonder what you make of all this and the role that these chat rooms might have played in it.
Yes, I mean, if you'd asked me yesterday, which is the most stable state in Europe, I think I'd have said Germany. In fact, I must admit I'd never heard of the Reichsbürger movement. So this is a real shock. I mean, Germany had seen off a populist challenge through the election process and had elected a very centrist coalition government. And then this plot is discovered. As we've been told, clearly the security services have been following this for a year or so. They had it under control. They chose their moment to strike. But nonetheless, it does show that there is this undercover far-right network, not just in Germany, and it had reached the size of possibly 2,000 people prepared to commit violence, and a number of them pretty heavily armed, I think. And I'm sure dark web chat rooms, conspiracy theorists in America, but perhaps elsewhere as well, fuel this sort of conspiracy belief that powers these groups. And that is part of the story. I think I'm right in saying that there's always been a certain far-right element in German politics, but this comes as a shock in a country like Germany. And my question is, what is the reach beyond Germany? Are there cells like this in other European countries with these sort of fantasy projects, which could lead to serious violence? I mean, we remember the case of Anders Breivik in Norway, who killed 75 people a decade ago.
Well, not just in Europe, but in the United States, Amanda.
That's right. And we're beginning to see it's not just that it's growing, it's also the tactics now that are being used when we see these efforts that really do create a complicated system to be able to hack, right? What we're seeing right now in North Carolina, where people are out of power because there was a complicated strategy to really take down power. You saw this early on in Michigan when you had the militia just start off try and kidnap a governor. And so that's what's really scary about it is it's not just that it's growing, but the tactics are also changing and you need to keep up with it. Law enforcement has to keep up with it.
Why do you think it's growing?
You know, I think there's a sentiment that people aren't listening to some of these particularly rural communities and the world around them is changing. And then you add on to that inflation and you begin to believe that leadership in this country, or at least in America, isn't quite right. And so it's a moment that not only you can have a voice, but you can take over. And I think the other aspect here is you have to crack down on it. The fact that January 6th, it took so long to really say this was wrong, for leaders to say this was wrong, just meant that you got rewarded for doing those kinds of things, and it allows that kind of conversation to fester. And no doubt, social media is a new place where these kinds of conversations are happening without any oversight.
Do you hear all those echoes, Dr. Schindler, there in Germany?
Absolutely. So the primarily planning tool was online. Chat fora. There were a couple of physical meetings where they tried to recruit members of the police and the military forces, but all of the primary planning was done online. And this means messenger services and social media, which really don't have the controls in place to really hinder or in any way bother people planning these things. This is not the very first time that something similar like this has been discovered in Germany. There was a couple of years ago a network called the Hannibal network, not quite as far advanced, not quite as large as this one, but they had already in a military style also planned a coup in Germany and procured 20,000 body bags, including making death lists of all the people they wanted to execute after they'd taken over power. So social media is really an accelerator here that allows these people to much faster grow their movements, much more easily connect with each other across distances that would have taken much longer before. So it really is a technology that needs to do better in making sure that things like this are disrupted before they get to a stage where we have 3,000 police officers and 150 objects in Germany, 11 out of the 16 federal states.
Just very quickly before I let you go, is that the end of the Reichsbürger? Are they still a threat?
Well, this is 52 people, 25 arrested, 27 under investigation, out of a movement that is by the Federal Domestic Intelligence Service considered to have 21,000 adherents, 1,000 of slightly over 1,000 of which are supposed to be willing to use violence. So no, it's not the end of the Reichsbürger, but it's certainly it's a big hit against one part of the Reichsbürger.
Peter, very quickly, I know you wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, just to say that I think this case, lawmakers need to be aware when they're considering the balance between liberty and security in these data protection laws, that security agencies do need access to the data to stop this kind of potentially very dangerous plotting. I think it is a bit of a case study.
But you've got a story.
Making sure the balance is
You've got
right.
a story just tonight, Peter. Apple's saying that they're going to encrypt everything that's on iCloud. I mean, companies are going the opposite way so that governments and police forces can't get access to this sort of stuff.
I mean, there is another side to the case for security authorities being able to know what is going on in the dark web.
Really interesting chat. Dr. Schindler, lovely to talk to you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.